Alright. My value in this case is that of morality. The reason for this is because we need to know that it is wrong to push things onto people instead of letting them choose freely. My criterion is that of human rights. The reason for this is that we need to respect human rights before we can push something on someone. Contention 1. Respecting freedom to think. In order to push democracy on people in the first place, we have to treat them like they already have our rights. While they might not believe that everyone in their country should have the same rights as people here, to push democracy, we have to think that they do. And this is a quote from EPA, only a third of Libyans reportedly say that they want a democracy within the 5 years. So, if we give them a vote on it instead of pushing democracy on them and forcing them to think a certain way, we could see that they do not want it, and we would need to respect their hypothetical free speech rights, especially if their government right now is not there in the first place. Contention 2. Democracy would not sit there. Today the Middle East lacks the conditions such as democratic political history, high standards of living, and high literacy rates, from Cato.org. Another reason for not promoting democracy in the Middle East is it would simply be too much change for that area, and statistically would not work. If we change something overnight, then obviously it's going to just have some negative effects, and everybody's just going to get really disoriented. So I will now move on to attack my opponent's case. My opponent's value is that of safety, and I would just like to bring up that there is lots of violence in the U.S. and other countries, maybe not as much as in the Middle East, but definitely there's violence widespread across the world. And, I mean, there are things like Columbine and Sandy Hook that have happened that just, they're violent, and it's just hurting people. So I do not believe that that democracy would help this, as there is violence in places other than the Middle East. My opponent's criterion was reduction of human suffering, and there are suffering in other nations as well. I mean, everybody in, say, Africa is suffering pretty badly right now, and there are places such as Japan. In Japan, there's a really, really high suicide rate, things like that. It's just like there's suffering everywhere. My opponent's general point for contention 1 was that terror increases with autocracy. And if anybody that wasn't causing terror could just leave the country, so obviously it's going to show up as they have more terror there because everybody that isn't causing terror has left the country. Contention 2, my opponent's contention. He says that fewer rights basically results in higher terror, which this is not necessarily the case, as there's still terror and violence in other countries, like I said. And there, even with more rights in the U.S., there is things like gun violence and things of that nature. And my opponent's third contention is that a democracy deficit is what is causing terror. And again, I would just like to reference Sandy Hook and Columbine, all these things that have happened, and just violence everywhere else besides the Middle East. And because violence has happened in places with democracy, and it's happening pretty often, even a thing like mugging somebody on the street, that might not be classified as terror, but that's still violence, and violence is causing human suffering. Thank you.
Do you want me to cross-examine you or what? Yeah!
It seems as though my opponent is not open to cross.
Okay.
Wait, let's see what time it is. Okay, so I guess at 4:20 I will start.
Hi. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Now, okay, a lot of your case is based around the idea of giving people the right to respecting other people's opinions, correct?
Yes.
You believe we should respect the opinions of people in the Middle East to choose that they do not want democracy.
Yes, or...
Are you aware that democracy is letting people choose what they want when it comes to government?
Not necessarily, because they can't change the government if we impose a democracy on them.
You're saying that if people are allowed to decide what they want, they're going to change it to be what they want?
I'm saying deciding their governmental system, not deciding things after their governmental system is in place.
I'm not
Because
quite sure I understand what you're trying
that
to
can be
prove.
accomplished with many other governmental systems, not just democracy.
Okay, but you repeatedly gave the idea of allowing these people to choose what sort of government they want, which is exactly what democracy is. Are you aware of what democracy is?
Democracy is government by the people.
By the people? All right, and where exactly did you get that definition?
It's just the general
Just a
knowledge.
definition. All right, so you don't have a sourced definition of democracy.
No.
Okay.
But it's general
Now,
knowledge.
okay, so you're saying that democracy is government by the people, right?
Yes.
Okay. Wouldn't allowing people to choose how their government is, as you're saying, should be done in the Middle East, be democracy then by your own definition?
Not necessarily
Not
if we're
necessarily.
imposing it on them.
If we are imposing the right for people to be able to choose their own path.
If we are forcing any government...
Forcing people to choose what happens to them.
For,
So you're saying people should not be given the right to choose what happens to them?
not at all.
Not at all?
No.
Which is why you're supporting the negative.
Right.
Okay, so the negative case, from your perspective, says that people should not be allowed to choose what they want to happen to them.
No, they should be allowed to choose what
They should be allowed to choose, which is why you think democracy shouldn't be instilled there.
we shouldn't force it on them.
We shouldn't force it on them. We should let them choose what sort of government they have.
Yes.
How exactly would you propose that they choose their own government then?
We stay out of what their business is.
To stay out of their business and allow autocracies to continue reigning and giving people no choices?
No.
Because you are aware that in the Middle East, most of these choices that you're talking about, where people get to choose their government, are made by the people who are in the government, not your average Joe who lives in his yurt all day.
Yes, but that...
All right,
but
no further questions.
all right.